There's a great deal of items in the Labyrinth Tristram. You can find items that give you a massive boost, while others just lead you straight to hell. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Farzi, and this is the next episode of Diablo 1 Unique Items, the Defender. Now, the Defender is an oddball of a weapon focused on, you guessed it, defending the wielder versus killing the bad guy. It's essentially the definition of a good offense is a good defense. I would disagree because killing the son of a bitch dead means he's not going to hurt you, but you know what? If it works, it works. I will say that it does share the same name as a weapon wielded by R.A. Salvatore's Drizzt Do'Urden, though I would argue it's not quite as cool, but it really does show the influence that D&D and all of its material had over Diablo. Now, the Defender is a saber with a default sprite, a straight single-edged blade with a basket hilt guard around the handle. It has a very 18th century Scottish look to it. Its quality level is 1, so you're liable to find it pretty early on, and it has the same requirements as a standard blade, 17 strength, standard damage, which is 1 to 8, and stock durability, which is 45. Its other stats are as following: armor class 5, plus 5 to vitality, and minus 5 to hit. Not the worst combination of stats I've seen in a low-level item. Not really a fan of that last one, but there's actually something up with it, and we'll get into that when we cover it individually. Now, armor class 5 is pretty self-explanatory. 5 to your armor. Same as, say, a middling helm, small shield, or even a cape going up to a middling robe in terms of body armor. So, yeah. You get a nice boost to your armor, though it doesn't really seem to do anything for blocking, for what I can tell, but that's a whole nother can of worms that I'm not getting into in this video. Still, that extra armor class can really help you out in the short term. Plus 5 to vitality, again, self-explanatory, more vitality, more HP. Though this is dependent on class, as explained in the Torn Flesh and Souls video, but I'll give a quick refresher for our new viewers. Warriors gain 2 hit points per point of vitality, rogues gain 1.5, and the sorcerer only gains 1, so 10, 7.5, and 5 hit points respectively. And yes, based on my observations from the Constricting Ring video, the game does in fact calculate fractional hit points. It's definitely good to give you that little bit more leeway to take a couple hits. Granted, you don't want to get hit in the first place, but if the armor fails, you got that little bit of extra padding. Finally, we have that minus 5 penalty to hit. Now, this isn't as horrible as it sounds. It gets a little hard to hit targets, but unless you're playing melee rogue or you're out of mana as a sorcerer, it's really not an issue. At least in the case of the warrior, as something I mentioned during the first episode of the series was that the rogue had a hidden bonus to hit with bow weapons, plus 20%. Well, the warrior apparently has the same thing going for him in melee. If you go from a 67 to a 62% chance to hit, it's actually going from an 87 to an 82. Not horrible, granted I'm not a fan of that penalty, as stated, but you're not suffering over much for it. In fact, I really didn't notice too much of a difference aside from a slightly higher time to kill due to the weapons and the anemic damage that was for the enemies I was facing. Now, there's a rumor about this weapon that a glitch exists where if you drop it and pick it up consecutively, it increases your chance to hit by 6,700, but I wasn't able to get it to do this, or this may not even be a thing. If you're a long-time player or someone who just picked up the game and can confirm this for me, let me know, because I'm kind of curious. So, what do I rate it and how do you use it? Well, it's a D tier item, and as for the usage, it's going to depend on class, but not for the reasons you think. The warrior can in fact make the most of it, at least on paper. That plus 5 to armor class is pretty good, and having an extra 10 hit points ain't nothing to sneeze at either, and that minus 5 penalty to hit, as stated, is offset by the warrior's to hit bonus. But the problem is the low damage makes it really not worth using, as it takes far too long to kill some enemies, depending on where your RNG falls in later levels, and usually by then you've got some better gear. As for the rogue, look buddy, if you're using a sword, you're either doing it because you're doing a challenge or you're just looking to suffer. Just stick to your bow. Come to think of it, that's been a running theme here in this series when it comes to some of these items. Anyways, the sorcerer actually gets some use out of it. That extra 5 hit points comes in handy, and the 5 armor class means you don't get hit as often, and the minus 5 penalty to hit doesn't really come into play until you run out of mana and have no potions. Or you run into this fucker right here, like I do, every run as a sorcerer who's immune to fire. And you've only got one spell due to shitty RNG, which is Firebolt, and you forgot to take your staff like an idiot. Look, as much as I say with the Split Skull Shield video, this weapon, despite having its perks which are fairly beneficial to a sorcerer, you lose out on that safety net not having your stat to fall back on if you run out of mana or run into an enemy who's immune to a certain type of spells. This, combined with having the slowest melee attack in the game, really doesn't help matters either. I've had my games turn to straight up survival horror at times either because I didn't manage my resources correctly or the RNG was scarce on spellbooks. I will say it pairs well with other items that have high defense or stat boosts. Hell, I found a unique item known as the Rainbow Cloak that gave me additional stat boosts on top of being marginally more effective than the leather armor I was using. But that's about its only saving grace. Hell, you compare it with the Split Skull Shield for an armor class of 20, but still, it's going to be touch and go, especially if you don't have any spell diversity. Look, if you decide to use it, no matter what class you are, take its stats into account. Otherwise, sell it for the 500 gold it's valued at, get some supplies, and better gear. Anyways, I hope you've all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time. Stay salty, everyone.